The Acrobat PDF file format is without a doubt the most important core technology in the professional creative space today. If you want to send a proof to a client, you'll likely send them a PDF. If you want to send a finished document to printer, you should probably send them a PDF. If you're trying to put documents on the web that can be viewed as well as printed, you're going to use PDF. So it's crucially important that as an InDesign user, you be able to create robust PDF documents. Now you can make PDF files in two ways from InDesign. First, if you have Acrobat Professional, you can print to PDF via the Print dialog box. I'll go to File, Print, and then I'll choose Acrobat PDF from the Printer pop-up menu here. This basically prints PostScript to disk and then uses Acrobat Distiller to turn it into a PDF file in the background. However, I'm going to hold off on talking about the whole print dialog box thing until the next chapter, but I will say now that while this is one way to get a PDF, I much prefer the second method. The second method is to go to the File menu and choose Export, or press Command-E or Control-E on Windows. And in the Export dialog box, I'll make sure the Format pop-up menu is set to Adobe PDF. Now I can choose Save. Now there are so many different options in this dialog box and in all these different panels. I could do a whole online training library titled just on these PDF options, but I'm just going to focus on a few, just the things you really need to know about. The first thing you need to pay attention to is the Adobe PDF preset. Adobe has put together presets. They're packages of settings of this dialog box that are commonly used, and typically you'll use one of these things, or maybe you'll make a little change to it here and there. Let me talk about these PDF X1A and smallest file size and all of these. It all comes down to whether or not transparency gets flattened. So let me talk a little bit about flattening and transparency and compatibility, this compatibility pop-up menu here, for just a moment. And although this may seem kind of technical, the question of Acrobat 4, 5, 6, this might be the most important part of this entire dialog box right here. First, if you're just making a proof PDF to send to a client or someone, or you're making a document for a web download, then go ahead and choose Acrobat 6. In these cases, if it's just a proof or something like that, you don't have to worry about flattening. On the other hand, if you're creating a PDF that you're sending to a print house, and if you've used any transparency effects in your document, such as drop shadows, or you've imported a Photoshop file with transparent areas, then you have to think about flattening. You see, transparency has to be flattened before printing on a PostScript printer, because PostScript doesn't understand transparency. The flattener and how to control it is an advanced topic that we'll cover in another title, but what you need to know right now is who's doing the flattening, your copy of InDesign, or someone else downstream who's printing from Acrobat or another application. Now, if you want a PDF that is the lowest common denominator, something that will print on pretty much anything, then you're going to want to use the Acrobat 4 file format, what they call PDF 1.3. And I would recommend that you choose one of these presets, such as PDF X1A. PDF X1A is basically a CMYK-only Acrobat 4 file. You see, when you choose that, it automatically changes to Acrobat 4. That's what most of America has standardized on, and what many magazines and newspapers insist on receiving when you send them ads. In Europe, they're more comfortable with PDF X3, which is similar, but basically adds some color management options into the mix. Now, if the print house has told you that they're okay handling the transparency flattening themselves, and you trust them, then you might want to send them an Acrobat 5 or 6 file, because these formats support transparency. You basically give them the responsibility for printing it right. Now, PDF X4 is a new standard, and it's basically an Acrobat 5 file, and the transparency is built into it. If your printer says, go ahead and send PDF X4, then they probably know what they're doing. Again, to summarize, if I trust the printer, I'd much rather they handle all the flattening, because they'll probably get it right. But if I'm not sure who's going to print it, then I usually just make a flattened PDF X1A file. Again, that's an Acrobat 4 file. Let me talk about some of these other settings now. What pages are going to be in the PDF? All of them, or just a range? In this case, we only have 2 pages, but if you had a long document, you could set up a range, like I want to print page 2 and 5 and 10 through 15, stuff like that. You want to leave the spreads checkbox turned off unless you're making a proof, and in the proof, you want the left and right hand pages to be facing each other on the same page. I usually just leave that off though. Now the rest of these checkboxes I tend to leave off except for sometimes view PDF after exporting. Oh, this little dialog box just means that I've typed pages that don't really exist, so I'll go ahead in here and just change that back to 1 to 2. So I'll turn on View PDF after exporting, and we'll go on to the next panel. The compression panel lets me control how large or small my PDF is going to be. And in general, if I'm making a PDF that I'm going to put on a website, I want to make it as small as possible. So in that case, I would probably actually choose a different preset here. I'd probably use smallest file size. And look what happens when I do that. The files, all these color images and the grayscale images get downsampled significantly, and they get compressed with low quality compression. You have to be a little bit careful here because low quality compression can really be low. Now note that these images are only referring to bitmapped images, like Photoshop images that have pixels in them. If you're going to press, you definitely don't want to use that. It's going to be far too low quality. And you want to make sure you have a much higher resolution. This is probably even higher than you need, but that's definitely high enough for high quality output. In the Marks and Bleeds panel, we have the ability to add various marks to our page. For example, crop marks and registration marks. These are the 4 I usually turn on, but some people just turn them all on. That's fine too. Check with your printer before you turn these things on, okay? Because some printers want printer marks in the PDF and some printers don't. If you have objects that bleed off the side of the page, you need to pay attention to bleed and slug. You know what I mean by bleed? In this document I don't have anything bleeding, but if I had this background color going off the side of the page, and I wanted my printer to actually print it on a larger size sheet, and then trim it down so the color actually looked like it went all the way off the side of the page, well, in order to do that, I must use bleed. I must specify a bleed amount here. For example, I could go in here and say, let's say 1/4 inch, and these are all linked together, so I'd get 1/4 inch on all 4 sides. If you don't do that, then the PDF will actually crop off right at the edge of the page, and that may not be what you want. The output panel lets me control the color conversions that are going to be going on here, and this has to do with color management for the most part, and the color management is an advanced topic that we'll be covering in a later title, but suffice it to say that if it's a PDF X1A file, it will be converted to CMYK, and if it's not, let's say PDF X4, it'll be converted to something else, or in this case, it won't be converted at all because the color management is handled downstream by the printing application. I'll set this back to PDF X1A for right now, and we'll go on to the Advanced panel. In the Advanced panel, there's 2 things we need to pay attention to. First, fonts. Are your fonts going to get subsetted when you make the PDF? That means, should the entire font be embedded in the PDF, or should just the characters that you actually used be embedded? PDFs from InDesign always have some of the fonts embedded in the PDF, but do you want the whole font or just a subset? And there's really only 2 settings here that are relevant. 100% means go ahead and subset it. Just use the characters that I used in the document. That helps keep the PDF file size small because you don't have to embed the entire font all the time. On the other hand, if I set this to 0%, 0% means embed the whole font all the time. So your PDF file gets much larger, but some people prefer this because they believe that it's more flexible for the printer downstream. That is, they could receive your PDF and they might be able to make edits to it using PDF editing software that they wouldn't be able to do if you had subsetted your fonts. The other thing that you need to pay attention to here is the transparency flattener. And generally, I leave this set to high resolution. If I ever see it set to medium, I just set it right back to high. Now, this doesn't really have that much to do with resolution. This really should be called high quality because it's the high quality transparency flattener. Again, this only comes into play when you're using Acrobat 4 PDF. If you use Acrobat 5 or later, well, those support transparency, so it just gets grayed out. You don't have to worry about it at all. But if you use Acrobat 4, then you are handling the transparency. Your copy of InDesign is flattening the transparency, and so you need to use high resolution. Make sure it's high. Finally, you could require a password to open the document if you want to. I don't recommend it, but if you're sending a PDF to a client and you don't want anyone else to open it, well, you could go ahead and do that. The option is yours. Then there's the summary, which I find completely useless. but if you want to look through it, that's, be my guest. In general, I always go through the panels one more time before clicking export, just to make sure all the settings are what I expected them to be. This got turned off, so I better go ahead and turn these back on again for what I'm doing. It got turned off when I changed my preset up here, I believe. And now that looks great, and I'm ready to click export. After I click export, it saves the PDF to the desktop, in this case, and it launched Acrobat, and here I am looking at the PDF. You can see that the document looks exactly the same as it did in InDesign, plus the crop marks and the color bars are all right there. I'll zoom out with Command 0 or Control 0 on Windows, and we can see the page information is added at the very bottom of the page in little tiny letters, and it looks pretty good. As you can see, making PDF files isn't difficult at all from InDesign. But what is sometimes difficult is making the right decisions for the best quality output.